Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Land to Lots podcast. This is Carter Froelich, and in the next series of podcasts, we're going to be exploring the third and final phase of the launch sequence, and that is related to the management of the financing. And for those of you who may be new to the podcast and are just jumping into this, asking yourself the question, what the hell is the launch sequence? Let me answer that for you. So the launch sequence is the unique process that we at Launch have developed over the last 40 years to assist our private sector clients in the financing of their projects, public infrastructure, the reduction of their costs, the mitigation of their risk. And the launch sequence itself consists of three series of steps that is broken down as follows. Number one, planning the transaction. Number two, the implementation of the transaction that was planned. And then the third phase, of which is the subject of the next upcoming podcast, is the management of the financing. If you haven't listened to the podcasts related to the planning of a transaction, explored in episodes 36, 37, and 38, and then followed up by the implementation, meaning implementing that which was planned. That is discussed in episodes 42 and 43. I encourage you to go back and listen to those episodes before you come to this one. It'll make more sense. The management of financing has a lot of different components. And to some degree, that which we will be managing is going to be dictated, number one, by the type of district that we have established. Number two, by the state in which we are working. For instance, California has a lot different regulations and requirements than does North Carolina. Florida is different than Texas. All of the districts and states have nuances to them. However, some of the general concepts that we'll be discussing are, number one, do we have to do competitive bidding or do we have to do public bidding? Do we have to pay prevailing wage? Do we not have to pay prevailing wage? How do we establish the ground rules and documentation necessary by both statute and district agreements to prove that we have followed all of the requirements necessary by both project-related documents and statutory requirements to ensure that we can construct out of bond proceeds and or be reimbursed for costs that we have advanced for the benefit of the district for the project and are being repaid. So a lot of different nuances, and typically what we find happening is that we plan these transactions. We then go and implement them, and we have a lot of different parties at the table. There could be jurisdictional representatives, agency representatives, district representatives. There's underwriters, there's bond counsel, there's disclosure counsel, there's appraisers, there's market consultants, there's trustees. I mean, there's a lot of people at the table making sure that the district is formed and ultimately that bonds are issued. Once bonds are issued and everybody goes away, the developer and the district representatives are looking at each other going, well, what the hell do we do next? And that's where we really step in, because in many ways, the management of the transaction is one of the most underappreciated segments of the transaction. But as we are going to get into the details during the next a couple of podcasts, it is absolutely the most important, because if we are not following the steps that are required by statute, if we are not providing the district with the information that's required to build or be reimbursed, if we are not making the quarterly or semi-annual disclosures to the bondholders, then we could potentially lose our ability to be reimbursed for that infrastructure that we had thought we were going to get reimbursed for, or by not following some of the SEC requirements that are outlined in the bond indenture and the developer continuing disclosure obligations and district disclosure obligations, that we could potentially be impacted negatively on future bond issuances. So this is a critical component of the financing. And in my opinion, it's one of the most important, because we can literally go through and plan this transaction, document the transaction, and if we don't do that which was required in our transactional documents establishing the district, all could be lost. And a perfect point of this is it gets into the first topic that is part of the management, and that is the public bidding assistance. And I'm going to give an example of this here in just a minute. But many states require that if we are going to use public money to fund public improvements, you have to go through the public bidding process or some derivation to allow the public, quote unquote, to be able to fund this public infrastructure that will be funded with public money. One of the places where we see this is in Arizona, for instance, where we literally have to follow, in the state of Arizona, Title 34, and we have to go through the public bidding process. The public bidding process is a little bit different for MUDs in Texas as it is for CFDs in Arizona, but this is why it's so important to have a professional that is familiar with these requirements, that can be the pathfinder for you and your team as you're getting your feet wet and learning all of the various steps that are required. For instance, in a public bidding, oftentimes what we have to do is publish a notice to the public saying, hey, we are going to be funding this infrastructure. We are soliciting bids from the public. The lowest responsible bidder will be awarded. We are having a pre-bid meeting at this location, at this date, and at this time. Come and we will hand out the plan sets, and we will conduct a meeting related to what is expected and what is required for you to publicly bid. So we have the meeting. Bidders come. They may ask questions. We have to document those questions and put them as part of our bid packages. We send out the bid packages. The bid packages come in a couple weeks later. They're recorded, they're certified, and then the lowest responsible developer or lowest responsible bidder is awarded the contract. And the key word here is lowest responsible. So there may be a contractor that is the lowest bidder, but because they have a reputation of change ordering you to death, they may not be the lowest responsible, and we can throw the bidder out. So there's a lot of nuance related to public bidding. Some states don't require public bidding. However, you as an organization may want to go out and get competitive bids. So you're basically kind of following the same requirements, although you're not posting to a newspaper or to the Dodge Room or some sort of third-party bid advertiser, but you're making sure that you're keeping everybody honest and you're getting the lowest construction costs provider for your project. It's really, really important to know what this process is. For instance, this is a real life example, and I can't make this stuff up, but we had a public builder. The public builder wanted us to work with the jurisdiction in which they had a large project that was not familiar, or they had not done any type of public district financing in a long time. In fact, they had stopped doing it. We, working with this builder, were able to revise the city's old special district policy related to the use of tax exempt bonds to finance public infrastructure. the requirement was, as part of this, and we were successful in getting the jurisdiction to reenact their policy. As part of this, we brought our developer team in to the Public Works Department of the city. We said, here are the state's requirements related to public bidding. We are going to be following, this is our understanding of what those requirements are. These are the steps we are going to be following, and we had them enumerated. We shared that with the Public Works. We shared that with the city's legal team. We shared that with the finance team. Everybody on the city's team agreed that what we had laid out was in fact accurate, and that if we followed that, the city, meaning the city council and the city staff, would be the district governing board and district administrative staff, that we would have accomplished and achieved and adhered to the requirements of public bidding in the state that we were working. So the developer had the list. Everybody knew what had to be done. We had continuous meetings with the developer builder, reminded everybody that we had to follow these guidelines. They went out and did their bidding. And when the time came for us to update all of the costs related to our applications and petitions, we brought up the issue again of public bidding. The project manager, who we had been on multiple meetings with, had said that he had not followed the regulations and requirements that we had discussed previously with the city, that were in line with the state's enabling actions related to public district financing, but that he had just gone out and solicited bids from 3 of their favorite contractors. And they had selected and awarded contracts to what was the lowest contractor. And, our jaws just dropped because, we had documented this. We had gone through it. We had taken this guy to meetings. We had done everything. And we said, you know what, you're going to have to go back out and rebid everything, because we are in the process of forming this district for you, which means $70 million flowing into your cash flow over time. And you have to go out and you have to rebid it following the guidelines that we had discussed previously. Anyway, I don't know what internal dialogues and discussions went on within the confines of this developer builders conference room, but the decision was made that they were going to go with the lowest, the contractor they had awarded the contracts to, and that they were not going to go forward with the district because they didn't want to go back and publicly bid the contracts. Now, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that decision, but here again, it was our client's decision, and we respected it, and we stopped our formation of the district. But I have a hard time believing that the non-bidding of these first couple of projects would have impacted their pro forma more than the $79 million that we were going to bring into their project over time through this district. But this is a real story, and once we have these districts formed, it is absolutely imperative that everybody on the team know what the requirements are as it relates to what has to be done when, for the various, quote unquote, management levers we have to pull to make sure that we're able to have a revenue event related to the construction and or reimbursement of eligible public infrastructure through the district. One of the other things we do as it relates to public bidding assistance, and here again, we can do as much or as little as our clients would have us do, but literally what we will do is prepare public bidding manuals for our clients, and they follow what are typically the 3 types of bidding that a developer contractor can do in the public realm. That is a design bid build, meaning we prepare the drawings. When the drawings are at a sufficient completion percentage, it could be 30, 60, 90%. It really depends on how much risk the developer wants to take. But we then bid those plans. And then once the contracts have been awarded, we build those plans. That's design, bid, build. The other is design, build, where we're not necessarily looking at a lowest responsible bidder. We're looking for the most qualified contractor that can design something specific and then build that. So it's called design build. Oftentimes we see this as it relates to specialty wastewater or water treatment plants where the city, the jurisdiction says, I've got to have an XYZ plant. And so we put out a request for qualifications related to firms that have the qualifications to build that ABC plant or XYZ plant. The third type is a construction manager at risk, where here again, we're not looking at necessarily at a bid amount. We're going out, first of all, looking for qualifications for the CM at risk. And once we have found the best construction manager, then we negotiate price. If we don't come to a price, then we go to the second contractor on the list, and so on and so forth. So we oftentimes will prepare bid manuals for our clients related to these. And why do we prepare these bid manuals? Well, what we have found is that if we're working for a project that may have a 10-year, 20-year, 30 or 40-year, in some cases 50-year life, a lot of project managers are going to come and go during that time. And once we've documented the process that the jurisdictions that the district has bought off on, then we want to make sure that we are educating our client staff, that they have a manual and checklists and documents, and it's plug and play, meaning they literally go in, type the name. I mean, we have mail merge or documents where we type in the inputs, and those are merged into public notices. Those are merged into our clients' contracts, etc. So we try to leave nothing to chance. And once we have the prototype, we like to rinse and repeat. And should a project manager leave, that project manager is not taking his or her knowledge of the transaction with them. We're starting from scratch again. And the reason being is because we've documented this all in a manual and a process that is specific to the project and specific to the client that we're working with. So with this, I think what I'm going to do is stop the discussion related to the first installment of the management portion of the launch sequence, and we'll end it with our public bidding assistance that we can provide to our clients. But more importantly, it's the point I'm trying to get across is that the client needs to understand, the developer builder needs to understand what are the requirements for us pursuant to the documents that we entered into via the development agreement, the pre-annexation and development agreements, the district establishment, the district financing agreements, state legislation and enabling acts, to ensure that we, the developer, is going to be reimbursed for the infrastructure for which they've advanced funds or for which they're building out of bond proceeds. So if you find this podcast interesting, I really encourage you to share it with your team. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. In the next episode, we'll move into how we track all of the reimbursable costs that are going to be generated over the development cycle of the project. So we'll catch you next time on Land to Lots.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcast to never miss a new episode.